Hi, I'm Melissa Jacobs, and welcome to this episode of the Football Girl Podcast. The NFL is never boring, is it? Man, it is just one news bomb after another, and I can't believe on this very show, it was just a week ago that we were talking about Warren Sapp gifting a coworker with a vibrator, as if that was major breaking news, and that literally feels like it happened 6 years ago. So the Carolina Panthers are for sale. We're going to talk about that later on. We actually have a very jam-packed show, so I'm going to get to our guests in a second, and I'm going to tell you about them in a second. Although you probably already know who they are, right? Because you're clicking on something that tells you who the guests are, and then you listen to the pod. But if somebody doesn't go through that process, then I'm going to tell you who they are in a second. But the Panthers are for sale for pretty scary, terrifying, unbelievable reasons. Obviously, Jerry Richardson is not the Jerry that one would think would be under investigation for workplace misconduct, but he is. The team is available, became available Sunday night, and almost immediately, Diddy, Puff Daddy, Diddy, P. Diddy, Sean Combs. He had that other weird name. I can't think of it. The artist formerly known as Sean Combs or something like that. But he wants to make a bid for the Panthers. And he promised that first thing he's doing is signing Colin Kaepernick to compete with Cam Newton. He's going to have better music, and they're going to win lots of Super Bowls. So that's one bidder that we know of. Oh, and then Steph Curry joined in, and Colin Kaepernick himself joined in. So that would be like the most explosive, interesting ownership group in the history of sports, I think. And then another bidder I saw, another probably less serious bidder, was Joe Thomas, the left tackle of the Browns, who maybe has finally realized it's time to get out of Cleveland. His whole platform was to get rid of kickers and punters because they will never be punting on his team, on the Panthers. He's talking about the Panthers, not the Browns, obviously, who always need a high-level punter. So before I get to the show and the guests, again, that are very esteemed today, one of which is just Shattering Glass, I'm going to give you what I think is an ideal 10-point plan for the new owner of the Panthers, or the new owner of any NFL team. But since the Panthers are for sale, we'll talk about them. So here's my criteria. Number 1, under the age of 45. Number 2, he or she has not donated $1 million to Trump's inauguration. Number 3, he or she will be African American or female. Number 4, they will immediately hire Amy Trask, who was our first ever podcast guest. She will be immediately hired as the team president, or she will at least be offered the job, and hopefully she will take it. Number 5, we'll never hire a retread head coach who has never won anything of significance. There are a lot of those guys floating around, and we need a new vision. Number 6, unlike Diddy, this new owner will not promise Super Bowls. Because, here's a little hint, like winning the Super Bowl is really hard. And you kind of have egg on your face if you're promising it. You can ask Jed York of the 49ers. Number 7, we're getting into the in-game experience a little bit. So locker room celebrations, which we put on thefootballgirl.com and I think are always incredibly entertaining, even for teams that I don't really care about. That's going to be piped in live for fans that stick around. It's really cool because the locker room celebration of the victorious team. Oh, that doesn't really make sense, does it? Because the home team might lose. All right. When the home team wins, that will get piped in. And it's super fun because they thank the fans and they're in all their glory and they're screaming and dancing and it's amazing. And I also think it would lead to a little bit of a better traffic pattern because some people are just out of the stadium immediately and then some people actually stick around for that. Number 8, we're going to let dogs in. People can bring their dogs up to a certain weight limit because everybody loves dogs. Dogs are awesome. And is anyone really going to complain about a dog barking and like what's supposed to be a raucous stadium? Some stadiums are actually a little quiet. So I think the dog idea is a strong one. Number 9, there's going to be way better perks for season ticket holders, like a rotation of field passes for one. That's the coolest thing, to be on the field pregame. I mean, it's just a totally different vantage point. Maybe they can call some plays in the 4th preseason game. And then number 10, there's going to be a rotating in-game promotion. You know, they always have these things like, oh, if my team scores over 40 points, come to Taco Bell and get, you know, a free, I don't know, what do they serve at Taco Bell? Tacos and gorditos or whatever. This is going to be on the spot. So, and it's going to be based on streaks. So like if your kicker is Robbie Gould or Adam Vinatieri or whomever, and they've had a 50-yard field goal in 4 straight games, you know, Adam Vinatieri kicks a 50-yard field goal and all fans can get nachos on the spot. I mean, awesome, right? I'm gonna want to go to a game. So that's my plan. If you have ideas beyond that, I know this is a perfect 10-point plan, but if you have further ideas, please hit me up on Twitter at the Football Girl. Now on to the rest of the show. And again, it's jam-packed, so we should get to it. Our first guest, I'm just gonna be upfront with you guys. We actually tried to tape last week. This is Beth Mowins, who is just breaking barriers, shattering glass. She just came off of calling her 3rd NFL game this season. Just a phenomenal role model for all of us who work in sports, and the NFL specifically. So she was supposed to be our guest last week, and we taped an entire interview. A little insight to our, high-end operation here. It didn't work. The levels were recording, and it was echoey and weird, and it was not at all airable. So she was gracious enough to join me again this week after calling her 3rd game, and she has a lot of really interesting things to say about, everything, the magnitude of what she's doing and just the art of play-by-play too, which I don't think a lot of people appreciate. And then after Beth, we're going to talk to Jourdan Rodrigue, who is the Panthers beat writer for the Charlotte Observer and has been completely on top of this Jerry Richardson situation. She's going to kind of give us like a little, speaking of play-by-play, a little play-by-play of how the last, half week has gone down in Charlotte. It's really, really intriguing and unlike any situation that I think any team has faced in a long time. And after Jourdan, I'm going to have my weekly musing on a certain 34-year-old running back that I believe should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Just a reminder to subscribe to us on iTunes if you haven't already, and please review us and rate us and all that jazz. You can find us on Stitcher and SoundCloud and Google Play. And now you can find us on Podbean too, because we had a wonderful, I had a wonderful Twitter follow tell me that our podcast wasn't showing up. So we're now on Podbean as well. You can find us anywhere. And we'd love to hear from you. So without further ado, let's get to our first guest, Beth Mowins. Welcome back to the Football Girl podcast. I am so honored to bring on our guest again. As I mentioned in the intro, Beth Mowins graciously agreed to talk to me again after just severe and highly embarrassing technical issues. Thanks for joining me again, first of all, Beth.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure to be here.
We're only, what are we on? We're on show 4, and we don't have a best of yet or awards, but whenever we do, you're going to sweep all of them. But yeah, so as mentioned, Beth just called the Bills-Dolphins game. It was her 3rd NFL game this season. And in week 1, she became the first woman to ever do play-by-play on a nationally televised game. And we're going to get to, all the glass shattering in a second. But I was thinking, leading up to this Bills-Dolphins game, I don't know if you were, you met a new person or anything, but what's it like, when you meet somebody and they're like, hey, what do you do? Because, everyone asks what everyone does, right? Or they even do, if you're a woman, sometimes they'll say, do you work? And you're like, yeah, I'm just going to call an NFL game this weekend on CBS.
Yeah. Usually they wonder if you're either a coach or a writer or, if you're just a really big fan of the team, and that's why you have all this information. And then when I tell them what they do, sometimes it goes right over their head, or sometimes people now, put 2 and 2 together and ask, oh, are you the woman from Monday Night Football? And are you the woman that calls the games on CBS? And so It's kind of cool. People, I think, are so much more open to it, even now in just a short period of time, because there are other women now that are calling games, and certainly, when you look at a Doris Burke and a Jessica Mendoza in other sports, it's becoming much more commonplace. Every once in a while, you get one of those double takes, from somebody that sort of has to look twice, make sure what you're doing up in the booth. But for the most part, everybody has been great. And of course, I expected nothing less when I was in Buffalo. Great upstate New Yorkers with open minds. And hey, if you're a football fan, you're a football fan, and that's all they really care about.
Yeah, this was a bit of a homecoming for you, right?
Yeah, it was great to see, some familiar faces and even, a team that I had followed a little bit and a very similar fan base to a lot of the people that I grew up with in Syracuse. And so it's a special place. It really is. And like Green Bay, I think there's a certain pride that the folks in Buffalo get from being able to weather those kinds of storms. And even when the temperature is, with the wind chill in the teens, sort of a badge of honor to show up at the games, and really excited for them that they're talking about playoffs still this late in the year.
Yeah. I mean, and you didn't have that, what was your second game was what, the Browns, and I know it was the Browns. And
we had a nice indoor game, Browns at Colts, and a nice temperature controlled environment, which is always good.
little 180 from last week. But I mean, how did this experience, this third game, compare to the other two, given the playoff ramifications?
It's you always have interesting stories to talk about, and certainly you hope the game speaks for itself, which this one ended up doing. You can just call it a football game, but it's always great to pop up the standings, and you're talking about, who our fan base is rooting for that they might not normally root for. How does this score or this game affect these two teams? And so that always adds an element to it. And for our CBS group, I'm kind of new to it, and Jay Feely's kind of new to it, and we have a younger up-and-coming producer and director, and everybody, we're all competitive. We all want to do well, and we all all love our jobs and want to keep getting more and more games. So that's a part of it too. We're all playing and competing just like the teams are.
How would you assess your performance last week?
We were real pleased with the way things went. It was a second chance for our whole crew to work together, and so you always feel a little bit more comfortable together and sort of have a feel for the team chemistry and the teamwork, and there's a lot better communication too the second time around when you kind of know the expectations of everybody. And I think we got in, a lot of the elements that we wanted to talk about and told a lot of the stories that we wanted to talk about. And those are always kind of how we gauge, our performance. Did we miss anything? I think we really hit on all the big storylines of the day.
I had your volume up, because I was prepping for this interview with you, this conversation, I should say. And then also because I don't have a daughter, but I have a son who's football obsessed, and I wanted him to hear your voice. And I think I annoyed him because I kept saying, like, do you hear that? Like, that's a girl, right? That's a woman. And then it's funny. He's like, I think after the fifth time I said that, he's like, I know, Mom, it's a girl. Girls can talk football. And then he started getting on me like, why aren't you in the booth? There's usually at least one guy every time I'm on, that'll hop on social media, and it's sort of that backhanded compliment of, I really thought I was going to turn the volume down, or I really wasn't expecting much from you, but I actually really enjoyed the game and liked listening to you. So, if you can reach one or two a day, that's really all we can ask for, and for people to give us a chance and listen to the content of what we're talking about, then we think we can get some converts. Has it gotten better over the season? I say this, I know you're not going to want to comment on this, but in the first week, I mean, I think people didn't really know what to expect with you and Rex, and I think Rex has improved a lot as a studio host, but I think a lot of people were kind of disappointed in his role as an analyst, and in some ways it was like a lot of people thought you were carrying him, and then, I don't know if that sort of catapulted into just generally a little more acceptance or fast forwarding the acceptance.
I'm not really sure how other people reacted to it. I just know we had a really good experience together, and he was a rookie in terms of the TV side of things, and I thought he came a long way from our very first rehearsal game that we did. He put a lot of time and effort into getting ready to do that game, and I would agree. I think he's shown to be terrific in the studio as well. So I felt going in, I knew that I was going to be the veteran of our crew, and I was fine with that. I wanted that responsibility, and I've always kind of prided myself over the years, for better or worse. I'm often paired with a lot of new guys or younger guys to the business, and take a lot of pride in helping them sort of find their footing and jumpstart their careers, and bring them into this wonderful, wild business that plays out on national television, for better or worse, and all the stuff that comes with that is, something that I embrace every week.
Now, is there a dream analyst that you would opt to work with if given the choice? And I know Jay has been great. You guys seem to have good chemistry. You had your second game together, but like a Romo or Collinsworth or.
Boy, that's a good one. I've never considered that. I think the white whale for anybody would be Michael Jourdan. If we could get a headset on him and have him sit next to you to call a game, that would kind of be pretty cool.
No, not bad.
But I've been lucky over the years. I've had some great guys sitting next to me for football games, and what I've enjoyed is, and hopefully the fans as well, what one's a coach, one's a wide receiver, one's a tight end. I worked in the past with a quarterback and a running back and a linebacker. So I'm always interested in not only the different perspectives, but the different ways they watch the game and therefore call the game and prepare for the game based on the position that they played is always intriguing to me.
Yeah, I always wonder. I mean, obviously Tony Romo is the big breakout star from the analyst side. Is whatever seems to be the consensus. How much of that? I feel like he'd be amazing with you. It feels like he'd be amazing with anyone. But how much of that do you think is just like the history of his chemistry with Jim Nantz as well?
Well, I certainly think a big part of that, and of course I have my play-by-play bias on, but I think Jim Nantz is a huge reason that Tony has been so successful, and really it starts with being comfortable in that booth and developing that chemistry with the play-by-play guy. And I think Jim has worked that masterfully as you listen to the way that he calls a game. And I think he's actually, you can really sense that he's excited about it, and he's enthusiastic about sitting next to Tony as well. And what has impressed me, I think the most about Romo is I love his ability to sort of read the defense at the line of scrimmage and then tell us what the quarterback is thinking. Okay, the play's going to go this way, or okay, he sees the guy coming up, blitzing from the left, so he's adjusting his call and what works in this situation or that situation. I love, taking us inside the quarterback's head and the offensive coordinator's head. I think that's been fantastic.
He's been phenomenal. But back to you. Do you read the comments, Beth?
I'll read through stuff that people send to me. I don't ever search my name. That's a recipe for disaster.
You think? Not on social media in 2017.
You try and find people that have a legitimate question or a legitimate critique, or, you know, are interested in, you know, how you prepare or what's on your game board or why do you do this during this situation, and you try and find, you know, maybe those conversations, or people that will take the time to, you know, just send you a note that says, hey, you know, we really appreciated you know, we enjoyed the game. I think that's important, because too often I think the negative stuff gets all the attention. And, you know, like I've said in the past, I've got no time for negative people with negative attitudes.
Exactly. Is there a moment this season? I know when the first time we had this conversation, you mentioned hearing from just a wide array of colleagues in the industry, and I'm just wondering whether it was one of them or just even maybe it was the first game or the build up to the first game you caught. I mean, do you understand the magnitude of what you're doing this season?
Yeah, you know, I really appreciated, you know, trying to earn the respect of the people that you work with on your crew and other play-by-play announcers, you know, that they know what it takes and what you go through to get ready. That is the stuff that's most meaningful to me. You know, hearing from the other women in the business, a lot of whom came up through the ranks with, was very rewarding. And certainly the guys that I looked up to, and it was all guys in the business. So to be able to hear from a Jim Nance or a Dick Enberg or an Al Michaels was, you know, real special for me to know that, you know, you've earned sort of their respect. And now I hope that in 10 years, when there's other women calling the games, I'm sort of the, you know, the old soul or the veteran that can send them a note and say, hey, you know, really like the work you're doing. Keep up the good work. There was that little girl that was at the Monday night game that was dressed in ESPN announcer wear and had an ESPN microphone that she brought to the game with her mom and dad. That was a special moment to see her there and, you know, take a picture with her and say hello. And just to know that you can have that kind of positive impact. I think it's especially important for younger girls. It's okay to dream big. It's okay to be ambitious and to chase after what you want. I think that's important for younger girls, especially to hear.
Oh, that's nice. I didn't see the girl at the Monday Night Football game, but I have it recorded, so now I'm gonna go look. But what is, you know, I guess the approach. We talked about this last week, but there, you know, in terms of promoting yourself as a woman, you know, it's a catch-22, right? Because you could go around and, you know, have a victory tour in a sense and look what I've done and write books about it. We've seen that approach, or you could just kind of be quiet and do your job, but then maybe it doesn't resonate as much and as quickly with the general public of what you actually are accomplishing. So what is kind of your thought process on the best approach?
You know, I've always fancied myself, you know, a point guard, and I give my mom and dad a lot of credit for sort of developing that mentality in me, that it's important to be a team player and help everyone else around you. And any personal accolades or awards, that's great. You know, be humble in accepting those types of honors. But, you know, I credit my folks. You know, I came from a blue-collar, middle-class background where you let your actions speak louder than your words. And the best way to try and change things is from within your team. And that's kind of how I've always approached it. And if other people want to talk about, you know, being a trailblazer or the significance of it, those are great conversations to have. I've never chosen really to take the lead on that stuff, but certainly happy to be a part of it.
You've been doing play-by-play for think about 30 years. I mean, everything from women's basketball to volleyball to college football to the World Cup. What's the quirkiest, maybe it's not even an actual sport, but what's the quirkiest play-by-play you've ever done?
Oh, gosh. You know, back in the early days when, you know, I like to tell young men and women that are getting into this business, never say no for no particular reason. always take on a job, even if you think, is this going to be worth my time? Yes, it will be, because you never know who you're going to run into, who you're going to work with that will help you get your next gig. So back in my early days, I called everything on local radio. I called wrestling matches on local radio. The best way to do that is you better have a really good color commentator to help you out on those. For a couple of years, I called dog shows. We run around the country, and they were usually in some pretty good locations, and called dog shows. I had a great color commentator from the American Kennel Club, and just had a ball working those shows, and really was critical in my development, understanding and learning new sports or new things that I didn't know a whole lot about. Learned a really good lessons about how to research things and how to ask the right questions and make it sound all conversational while you're on the air. Those were probably two of the more outside the box kinds of things that I did.
That's fun. So could you come and do play-by-play for my Christmas dinner if I gave you a couple days?
That's really I'm not shy about having a running commentary, whether I'm shopping in the store or whether we're sitting down to dinner or.
And she passes the cranberry sauce.
I'm ready to
Joey.
to do it all. It's all about vocabulary.
So what's next for you, Beth?
I am getting ready this week for I have the Camping World Bowl, which will be December 28th, and then we're kind of watching and waiting. The NFL has a flex schedule for Week 17, so we may or may not have a game on December 31st. The NFL on CBS, and then it's jumping in with both feet for basketball season in early January. We'll hit the ground running and start preparing for college softball, which is really one of my favorite things to do. That Women's College World Series, we're so proud of how we've been able to grow that over the course of the last couple of decades.
Well, your versatility is amazing, and I thank you for everything you're doing for our gender, and I certainly hope that you're calling a lot more NFL games next season.
Oh, I'd love it. Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate your time and all that you're doing, too, for the good of the game.
Right. Thank you, Beth.
Thanks. Have a great holiday.
You too. Bye. And that was Beth Mowins of ESPN and an NFL play-by-play announcer for CBS. If you like the Football Girl podcast, you will definitely like the Football Girl newsletter. But only if you like presents, because getting the Football Girl newsletter in your inbox just once a week is like manna from heaven. Okay, maybe it's not that great, but we do give you original commentary and fantasy tips for newsletter subscribers only, and picks, and we try to throw in a few surprises each week. I promise you it's not boring and won't waste your time, and again, it doesn't clog your inbox. So if you would like to subscribe, go to thefootballgirl.com and you will see options to do so everywhere. Our next guest today has been covering the Carolina Panthers for the Charlotte Observer since 2015. Welcome, Jourdan Rodrigue.
Hey, Melissa. Thanks for having me. It's a real honor to be here today with you.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I could probably pinpoint the day you started at the Charlotte Observer because I, as you know, was partially responsible for hiring your predecessor, Jonathan Jones.
Yeah, I had big shoes to fill with him being gone, and he always spoke so highly of you as well. So I felt like I already kind of knew you without actually knowing you.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, I definitely miss working with him a lot. But and you've done a great job reporting, and that's why I wanted to have you on today to talk about Carolina. Although I think things are pretty dull there, right?
Oh yeah, total snooze fest, completely boring. Nothing is happening at all.
All right. Well, so I kind of wanted, as I told you, I wanted to make this sort of like a TikTok of the last, 72 hours or so. So, you guys know something's coming down, right? When the team is self-investigating Richardson, basically. Yeah.
So buckle in. So Friday around 6:00, the dreaded 6 p.m. news dump. The Panthers come out with the statement that they are launching an internal investigation which definitely raised some eyebrows, at least, among reporters and then later among people that were kind of tuning into what was going on. They were leading an internal investigation against alleged workplace misconduct by Jerry Richardson, but they were investigating based on a law firm that they hired, an external law firm, Quinn Urquhart, that they
all
had
sound the same,
hired.
those law firms.
Yeah, I mean, my goodness, there's 4 names there. And then, and the investigation will be led by Erskine Bowles, who is a former White House chief of staff, but is now a minority owner of the team. So obviously that's problematic, and it seemed to me a huge conflict of interest. But what it was clear was that the Panthers were trying to get ahead of something that they knew was coming down the pipe. So Saturday was kind of a weird day because it was kind of a little bit the calm before the storm when the NFL was kind of scrambling because the team launched the investigation and then alerted the NFL to the fact that they were launching the internal investigation. So the NFL was kind of caught scrambling to try and figure out what it was going to do at that point, and also trying to figure out what these allegations were. Like the rest of us, we had no idea what they were. We knew something big was coming down the pipe. So Sunday, we figured that it would be the story by Sports Illustrated would be released before game time. Obviously, it was released, right at kickoff, and a couple hours after the NFL had announced that they would be taking over the investigation of Jerry Richardson. And so that was when that so let me just paint this very surreal picture for you. We're sitting up in the press box, and Jerry Richardson sitting in his owner's box, which is
how
right
far from
behind.
the press box?
And it's on the other side. Okay. Well, it's kind of kitty corner from the. If you can be kitty corner in an oval,
yeah,
it's kind of kitty corner.
But you're on the same
press
level
box
as Richardson.
Yeah, we're on the same level. So, we're using our binoculars to try and see to the press box. They have a police officer stationed outside. One of our reporters is outside trying to see if he's going to go in and out. But, and they have a police officer out there, and he's kind of just sitting in there by kickoff, like nothing is different. It's, he has his big Bojangles cup of sweet tea next to him, and he and his wife are just kind of sitting there. And so then the story drops, and then the Panthers kick off against the Packers. And so everything is starting to happen at once. And it was just this really surreal moment because some of the people that were named in the story are up there in the press box with us. And, you have to go then ask them for comments, and, there's a lot of non-comments and a lot of scrambling around. So then we immediately start, running around trying to, gather some information about this from our own sources. And it was just very surreal. So by halftime, we had felt like, okay, maybe we can pay attention to the game at this point. We can start covering the game and have like the newsroom is kind of split up with different tasks on this. And so obviously the misconduct allegations are very serious. Alleged pacts of 4 workers over inappropriate conduct, including sexual and racial misconduct. So 3 examples of financial settlements for sexual misconduct and 1 over racial misconduct. And so that's obviously incredibly serious. And something that really stuck out to me the entire time was that the Panthers never came out and denied any of it. So we're kind of working on this assumption that there are things to find with all of this, and obviously really trusting SI's incredible reporting that they did on the story. And so then after the game, we go down and none of the players have read the report. None of, the coaches haven't had time. I mean, they've been playing a football game. They haven't had time to read the report. They've gotten a very, very small briefing of what the report said because they have to be warned about, what the media is going to be asking them. And I thought they responded well. Well, I thought the players responded well to it. I was a little hesitant about, I think Ron Rivera and he kind of delved into his own personal experience with Jerry Richardson, obviously without having read the allegations. But the players I thought responded really well, just considering the circumstances. Cam Newton was actually informed of the allegations as outlined in the report, right there live in his press conference. I thought he responded really well to that as well. And so then we go back up and we're trying to file on deadline. And then then the news breaks that the absolute bombshell that Jerry Richardson has decided to sell the team at the end of the season. okay, so then now we're, back on the phone and we're running around like chickens with our heads cut off and sourcing and all of that. And so, around, 1 a.m. and we're all wrapped up with that. So then we go in the next morning to Ron Rivera's weekly press conference, and the coordinators talk as well. And then there's an open locker room, but not very many players show up because they're getting treatment and whatnot. So we go in and ask Ron specifically about the allegations and his reaction to the team being sold. Obviously, he's disappointed that the team will be sold and hope it stays in Charlotte, but he then comes out and says that he has not actually read the allegations. First of all, I don't believe that for even
that's
half
crazy.
a second, but I mean, I think he has to be informed on all of this.
He has to at least know the big nuggets in there.
Yeah, exactly. Like the nut graphs, like I would imagine those are being spelled out to him pretty blatantly. Then he talked about how he had a conversation with Jerry right before the announcement of the team sale. So there's two really important things here. So Jerry Richardson let Ron Rivera know before they announced the sale that he was intending to sell and that they were going to make that announcement tonight. So that was who he told. Now, the interim GM, Marty Herney, was not informed. So that's something that's interesting because another thing that people are speculating about is Marty Herney a long-term GM for this team. Mm-hmm. So that kind of, to me, was a big giveaway in that. And second of all, another thing that they did not do was alert the players. So, talking to, 12 players about this, and they're all finding out from Twitter and from the media and from us reaching out to them and asking what they think about it. So it's kind of blowing everybody's minds and snowballing. And then Jerry, in his statement that he's selling the team, it's 5 paragraphs, and it doesn't mention one allegation of misconduct. It doesn't connect the dots. It kind of just comes out of nowhere, like, oh, nothing to see here. I've made this decision organically, kind of a perception and, understanding that the league is going to be investigating. So he doesn't want to incriminate himself, but it kind of just was very, he has not been a public facing figure for many, many years. And that just kind of, it kind of just purported or projected a nothing to see here kind of vibe for the whole thing, which I'm sure you guys, watching everything unravel also probably got that impression.
Yeah. My mouth is still agape. Just a quick, rewind. When this is all happening, are you surprised? Because that's not the Jerry, obviously, that most of us would have thought would be under, workplace misconduct investigation.
Yeah, everyone, yeah, that guy. I will say this. I'll say that nothing, I don't think, in terms of any of this in the Me Too movement or the things about, misconduct and sexual harassment, none of this has actually surprised me. I don't think that that's something that has surprised pretty much any woman who, works especially in a male-dominated field. But I will say that the fact that all of the speed at which it all happened and the detail in which they were able to get into these allegations was pretty shocking because everything happened so fast, and this organization is incredibly hush-hush about so many things that, Jerry hasn't even talked to media since I believe it was, 2012. So
really?
I think that, so he's not public facing at all and everything. There's, when Danny Morrison, the team president, left in February, nobody still knows the reason why for that. People, they basically just kind of smoothed it over by hiring a 6-person leadership team to replace his role. So this team has been without a team president since February. And then, Dave Gettleman's firing, it just all has been very, it's been a strange year. And so it's the rapid rate at which all of this kind of snowballed was something that did surprise me. But in terms of discovering that a male in a position of extreme power allegedly had abused that power did not surprise me at all. But it's so funny, you see your colleagues and people that will come up to you, can you believe this? And you don't want to be that person that's like, well, yeah, I can believe it. but just in general about the Me Too movement and everything. But you don't want to be that person that just all of a sudden just shocks your person who's coming up and trying to make conversation with you. But at the same time, I mean, can any of us really be surprised that these things continue to come out?
I mean, that was basically the genesis of my whole podcast last week, was just like Me Too hitting sports. And I mean, this was before Richardson, this was NFL Network. But I'm surprised that it hasn't grown. And I think, we're both journalists. I don't think that John Wertheim and Viv Bernstein were just like sitting back in their offices being like, think Jerry Richardson smells dirty. Let's just investigate him. I mean, there had to be a tip or something, and probably, very inspired by Me Too, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and what I do know about this is that story is that it had been being investigated for a really long time. So this is not just something that came out of the woodwork because now is the right time in terms of the climate. It's something that this story has been getting worked on and investigated for a long time.
Like before Me Too?
Yes. Yeah. That's my impression of it. Yeah. That's my impression of it. And so I will say, I do think there is some, with things like this, my personality is that I really try to find some of the silver linings to this. And I think part of it is, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of across the league. I think that just as we saw with the Me Too movement kind of emboldening women who felt afraid to come forward, or minorities who were afraid to come forward when there was misconduct, I think that this will help shine a better light on the lack of diversity in so many of these NFL organizations, and also kind of speak some truth to power, some of the accountability, because the league, as we've seen, has struggled so much to police these organizations in terms of making sure that everyone's following the proper protocol. I think, first of all, the NFL deciding to continue the investigation, which broke yesterday, is a huge opportunity for them to show that the women and the minorities that work in these organizations matter to them. I think that's a huge opportunity. I also appreciated what Ron, not all of it, part of what Ron said yesterday, and what defensive coordinator Steve Wilks said yesterday, because while Ron kept claiming that he had not read the allegations, he also said that he really thought that we have to understand that the victims are also incredibly important. They need to be heard, and this needs to be, the investigation, will allow them to be heard. And Steve Wilks also made that clear, is that the people on the side, or the victim side of things, also needs to be taken, incredibly seriously, where in some of these cases with the Me Too movement, we do not see that happening from men in positions of power. So I thought that was a silver lining. And then obviously after those press conferences, everything kept snowballing, because then, the league comes out and confirms to us that the investigation is ongoing. And then, I got a tip about Tina Becker, who is now their chief operating officer, and was able to kind of put that out there. And so she has now taken full control over the day-to-day of the organization, and Jerry has stepped aside.
Jourdan, who made that decision?
So what I have heard, and I can't confirm this as fact because I haven't been able to get it confirmed as fact, but just from a couple of things that I have heard, Erskine Bowles has been kind of helping navigate, but they also have a 6-person leadership team that took over for Danny Morrison up in the office, up in the executive office. So I would imagine it was a kind of a group decision. And, Tina has been with the organization for 20 years. She's incredibly intelligent. I never met her in person. I've heard great things about her and how she has been crucial in managing the operation of the team for the last couple of years. I will also say that I noticed in the Panthers press release on the topic that they made sure to put very high up in the press release that, she's one of the higher ranking female executive officials in the NFL. And then they also did not address the misconduct allegations. So I think, that's definitely, these little things, and you know this so well, when these little things that just kind of get your hackles raised a little bit when you read these, get your suspicions raised, and it's good to be paranoid in these types of situations.
Yeah. Do you think they I mean, reading about her credentials, I wasn't really, I had heard her name before, but I wasn't aware of her like deep credentials. But I mean, do you think this group strategically wanted to promote a woman as well?
I don't want to say that specifically because I don't want to take anything away from her work with the team, which has been extensive over the last 20 years. But I will say this, it does not hurt, especially with the investigation continuing. It does not hurt to have somebody, not only of her status and her caliber of personality, but also of her gender to be at the helm right now.
Yeah. I mean, the optics are obviously hugely important right now. Why do you think Richardson didn't just pass on the team? I knew the plan was always, I guess I didn't until a few days ago, that he was going to sell the team like upon death, basically, or his estate or whatever. But why didn't he just pass on the team like so many other owners have done? Even Eddie DeBartolo in San Francisco went to his sister when he was under criminal investigation.
So that really interesting thing about Jerry that I think a lot of people forget is he wrote his sons out of his will. So there is nobody that can take this team from him. And
why
his
did he do
estate
that?
could not. I have no idea. It's
okay.
all very murky, and and it happened long before I got here. What'd you say?
I said more things to investigate.
Exactly. I'll just put it on the list. It's fine. I'll totally just put it on the list. But yeah, so it was this big kind of fallout type situation here several years ago, long before I got here. And so there is not really anybody that can immediately just inherit the estate. And also it's, there's a lot of legal things wrapped up in the city itself that, they have to figure out before they can figure out, buyers and things like that. So especially because there are so many minority shareholders of the team, the PSLs, 52% PSLs, and Jerry had 48%. So that's all of that has to get figured out legally. If they try to kind of override any of the system that's already set into place, the PSL owners could sue the city, and the city could sue the team and the estate. So it's just all of it's so convoluted right now that I don't envy those lawyers that are working on it right now for sure.
Yeah, well, you saw Diddy, I think, made the first bid that was very official.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Steph Curry and, of course, Colin Kaepernick joined in. I mean, why not? That's quite the trifecta. I mean, what do you think I don't know, I guess it's Tuesday when we're taping this, so you haven't really talked to many players yet, have you?
I have, but I can't. I wouldn't be able to.
You have it in an upcoming
share the
story that we all need to read on the Charlotte Observer. Okay, I get it.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks for not breaking any news on this podcast. But what is your general sense of from the players or from Ron or just your own personal opinion of what the ideal next ownership looks like in wake of this situation?
Well, if I were to say, I mean, in my viewpoint, there is a huge opportunity here for an ownership group that has very much lacked diversity with Richardson to now bring in that diversity that is so necessary to prevent these types of things from happening. I mean, this type of thing in this day and age can topple an organization. So there's a huge opportunity here that I think is really important to keep aware of. But if I'm being realistic, I would think that a large ownership group will buy out Jerry's stake, the 48% stake in the company, which is worth, the organization itself is worth about $2.5 billion now. He bought it for $206 million in 1993. So what a punishment, right? Exactly. If these allegations are true, what a profit, So, so I think that it's more likely that a big ownership group from a giant, stemming from a big corporation or a big company or a personality will buy his stake, or at least combine to buy his stake. And then I think there are going to be a lot of minority partners that latch on through their own ownership groups that kind of would be a way for this big corporation, this big organization, whoever does buy the team, to kind of infuse that necessary diversity if they deem it important, which after this they really should. But if they, that's a big opportunity for them to then bring in smaller partners. This is where you could kind of see the Steph Curry or the different Charlotte personalities or the different personalities that might be interested. This is where you could kind of see them get in on the action is kind of on the lower tiers of things, because nobody could really buy him out outright except a large corporation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be amazing. What, I know the players aren't really there yet in mass, but just what has there been a cultural shift? I mean, with Tina Becker being in charge, as you mentioned, and it's only been 2 days. Is there a noticeable cultural shift? Is it all just too super strange?
It hasn't. I haven't seen anything tangible yet. I think people are still in shock, and also there is going to still be an investigation by the league. So I think right now it's a lot of that scene in SpongeBob where he's trying to think of the right word to use, and all the little SpongeBobs are up in his brain, and all the paperwork is on fire and all the SpongeBobs are running around. I feel like that's what the organization looks like right now. So I think that
you just quoted SpongeBob. That's amazing.
I did. Well, welcome to my weird brain, Melissa. But yeah, it's kind of chaotic right now. So I think that I would be interested to see what they do in terms of introducing Tina. I think that what they did so far is kind of embarrassing. They released a 4-question Q&A through the team website. They didn't make her available to media. They released a 4-question Q&A through the team website that did not even come close to addressing any of this. Just kind of asked her what her job looked like and all of that. So that was disappointing to see. But I think that they're just trying to kind of get through this investigation with as little damage as possible. I think they're kind of trying to get through the playoffs. And it's just going to be interesting. I think this is only the tip of the iceberg in terms of now the chaos is a little bit more drawn out. It's not this immediate burst of rapid chaos. I think the chaos will be a lot more drawn out this time.
Yeah, I loved what Becker said, though, in the release that, she's planning on them winning a Super Bowl. I thought that was very solid.
Yeah.
But, so at some point, we will actually talk about football and the playoffs and all that. And I'd love to have you back on to do that. But I super appreciate all the insight and your great reporting on this incredibly odd situation. So thank you, Jourdan.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was a real pleasure.
And that was Jourdan Rodrigue, Panthers beat writer for the Charlotte Observer. And now Melissa's musing. If you follow me on social media, you know my love for Frank Gore. I should actually say future Hall of Famer Frank Gore, because that's pretty much how I refer to him now. I know some of you don't agree, but allow me a second to try to change your mind. Okay, there's the sheer production. He is currently 5th all-time in rushing in NFL history. And Gore's only 253 yards shy of Curtis Martin. Gore says he wants to play next year. There's no reason not to believe him. So he's probably going to end up number 4 all time. If you look at the top 10 list, every single back on it is in the Hall of Fame except for Gore and Adrian Peterson. I think we can all agree Peterson's going to Canton. So Gore belongs there just on the illustrious career he's had. But also, think about some of his sub-stats. This is a 34-year-old running back. He hasn't missed a start since October of 2011. And he hasn't missed a game since December of 2010, which I actually believe is the most remarkable stat in football. I mean, think about Peterson or LaShawn McCoy or whomever it is, and think about if they didn't miss a game in 7 seasons. It's really uncanny. But then also when you think about Gore, all the dissenters will say, he doesn't belong because he's never been the top back in football. He's never been close. First of all, that's not true, because he actually was the number 3 rusher in 2006. and he's been top 10 in many other seasons, but that's not Gore's strength. Gore is not shifty and, he doesn't have this crazy breakaway speed, but he has, he's powerful, and he's always been underrated as a pass blocker. And even this year, he's just had some ridiculous blitz pickups. So, I don't know how you measure durability in a running back, but it's pretty important. And I think, you look at Frank Gore and he's the gold standard. So Gore does not like to talk very much, but I cannot wait for his speech in Canton. All right, that's going to wrap us up for the Football Girl podcast. Thank you to our esteemed guest today, the Honorable Beth Mowins of ESPN and CBS, who has now called 3 NFL games this season, and she might be calling a 4th. And I think highly of her because I just gave her the same title as the Supreme Court Justice. Also to Jourdan Rodrigue of the Charlotte Observer, who has been all over this Jerry Richardson saga, which is not going away anytime soon. Also a big thank you to our producer this week and next, David Tigaboo, who's filling in for Daniel Baker. And mostly the biggest thank you to you guys for listening. I don't know if you've been listening to all 4 episodes or this is your first, but I appreciate you giving us a chance either way. If you like what you hear, please go to iTunes and subscribe. That is the best way for us to grow. And leave us a rating and review us. We actually got our first couple of reviews last week, which were very nice and glowing. I'm not sure they were submitted by actual human beings, but I appreciate it nonetheless. In the future, you can listen to our podcast on SoundCloud and Stitcher and Google Play, and now Podbean or wherever it is that you consume your podcasting. If you're celebrating Christmas, I wish you a Merry Christmas. I wish you a Merry Christmas. I just wanted an excuse to sing. I'm going to do a singing episode, one of these. I hope you guys will actually listen. You'll probably all tune out. But Merry Christmas if you celebrate Christmas. If you celebrate Hanukkah, enjoy the post-Hanukkah revelry. If you celebrate Kwanzaa, Merry Kwanzaa, Happy Kwanzaa. And if you're celebrating your fantasy football championship, congratulations. And if you're going to an NFL game this weekend, please, please, please bring your dog. I give you permission.